Welcome to the second episode of Digitaire's AI Theory to Reality series. I'm Raj, your host, and over the next 45 minutes or so, we'll be looking behind the scenes at how organizations are preparing for Gen AI. In this episode, we will focus on the financial services sector, and it's my pleasure to introduce technology leaders Daniel Taylor and Simon Rohrer. Daniel is the head of development at Trading Labs, where he oversees a team of financial technologists, developers, and quants who work closely with their client to create a data-driven ecosystem. An authority in asset management technology, Daniel was previously at Man Group with roles overseeing technology as platform architect, chief architect, and then CTO of trading platform technology. Simon, on the other hand, has spent his entire career advocating for modern ways of working, with roles in hands-on software engineering, agile coaching with a focus on technical excellence, and senior roles in enterprise architecture and strategy. He joins us from Copenhagen, where he's currently based, working as global head of enterprise technology architecture and ways of working at Saxo Bank. He is a co-author of the IT Revolution press book, Sooner, Safer, Happier. So to start off with then, what's the organizational policy on Gen AI usage and how are you preparing? I'll go to you first, Simon.
Thanks, Raj, and hi, everybody. So our policy is being prepared right now. So we have a fairly minimal policy in place that says, well, ChatGPT itself, the sort of raw, unprotected version on the OpenAI website, that our teams are not allowed to use that. But very rapidly, what we have done is to build and deploy for the organization a wrapper using Microsoft's wrapper around the OpenAI LLM. And so we effectively have our internal ChatGPT using the same underlying technology, but because that's all over the private internet, or rather over a private network, then our employees are allowed to place confidential data into it, so they can get a lot more value out of effectively the same capability. So that's our policy for that particular sort of element, the sort of ChatGPT style element of Gen AI. The rest of our policies, like I say, they are evolving. We are at a fairly advanced stage with setting out our AI strategy. We have a working group around policies, around things like ethical use of AI, data privacy, etc., and aligning, because we're based in Denmark, which is part of the European Union, and aligning with the forthcoming EU AI Act as well. So we, like I say, fundamentally, we have this very base policy of what basic services teams can use, and then the rest is it's in preparation with alignment with our evolving AI strategy.
Very interesting. I think lots of themes there we'll dig into a bit later as well, Simon. And Daniel, how about on your side? So what is the policy internally in Trading Labs?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So I think, as with Simon, I think it's evolving. I think one of the interesting things about Labs is a technology company, but we're kind of in the asset management ecosystem. So a lot of things that we're going to talk about here, I'll try and frame from two different perspectives. So the broad policy at the moment is we're looking at things on a case-by-case basis, because I think it's going to take a while for us to really kind of flesh out the policy enough so that it can kind of be devolved out, really. Obviously, probably in line with everybody else in financial services, some basic principles: no client data, no fund data, no position data, no IP, just flat. We're not haven't quite gone as far as Simon described there and having a private version. We don't really have the kind of the size to do that. But obviously, some very, very strong red lines about that, and that fits with our broader kind of InfoSec policy, and that we, probably like most asset managers, we're very, very protective of all of that data. Within Labs itself, we're finding use cases for ChatGPT, as probably anyone in development is at the moment, for all of that kind of thing. So kind of two slightly different worlds. in terms of kind of preparation, as with anything, once you have a policy, obviously super important that people are aware of the policy, and also within the asset management space, trying to run training so people basically, understand the basics of some of the stuff, understand what hallucination is, all of this kind of thing. So obviously awareness of the policy, but also giving people the training so they can actually, follow the policy.
Sounds really interesting, and I think you touched on some of the people aspects there as well. I'd like to come back to that.
Sure.
But before we do, I saw a stat the other day about 70% of CEOs really want to introduce generative AI into their businesses, right? Are you feeling that? How much pressure is there to implement inside your organizations? Maybe I'll start with you first, Daniel.
Yeah. So I'll kind of answer this from two slightly different perspectives. So I think within the asset management business, I wouldn't say it's pressure, but there's a huge amount of interest in what's possible, and that's kind of things like some slightly more mundane things like call transcription, kind of generating marketing material in the compliance space, kind of communication monitoring, cyber, kind of a whole lot of areas. And for the most part, that would obviously look at vendor products there. We wouldn't look to build it ourselves. From the lab's perspective, I would say there's not pressure to implement it, but we've kind of felt like it's something we should be looking at, right? As part of our offering, I feel like probably every kind of marketing department who's selling a product at the moment is trying to come up with a way of kind of getting, doing this AI and kind of trying to get it into their product. We did a lot of brainstorming in terms of what we could do. And we've really failed to come up with anything that's worth the effort. And we may be demonstrating a complete lack of imagination here, but it really, I think for us, it's like we already have some good ways of interacting with effectively our AI. And part of what Labs does is we build a training environment that is basically we would describe it as just trying to keep you aware of things, and those things could be like a lot of it is around behavioral biases and things. So kind of when a portfolio manager goes to put on a trade, and because our analytics say this trade is in their sweet spot, we pop something up. And that's we try to avoid being like a little clippy in the office thing that kind of popped up and says, "Hey, you're writing it." But it's kind of we try to do it in a much more subtle way and kind of say, "Oh, by the way, you're putting on a trade. This is in your sweet spot. You might want to size it up," kind of thing. So it's just kind of trying to keep people informed. So we couldn't really find any use cases where there's kind of this you want to prompt something and get a response back. It's just just the environment. It just doesn't work like that. And in terms of kind of getting data back to the portfolio managers, what we've found over many years of doing this is like plots are the most important things, right? Like it's just the classic picture is 1,000 words. So here's a plot, here's the trade you're doing, here's your sweet spot. There you go. This is why we're telling you to kind of size the trader. So we thought, well, we could use LLM, we could do something generative, we could describe it. And literally, we just got a lot of shrugs from people. It's like, we've got these great plots. Why do you want to kind of give us something? We've got to spend time kind of reading and interpreting. We thought about, could we generate the plots using AI? And I'm sure AI is great at coming up with pictures of cats playing basketball. But we actually found like the plotting infrastructure we had was really good. So again, we might be showing like a complete lack of imagination here, but there was nothing that we could come up with that we really thought this is worth the effort and kind of investing.
That's very clear, Daniel. But I think just as a minor point, even though a lot of organizations are struggling with generative AI, you have been successfully using machine learning and classical AI techniques as well. So yeah, I think we'll dig into some of the what the psychological impacts of that might be, and how that kind of plays a part in your field as well. Simon, what about Saxo Bank? I mean, how successful have you been with cats playing basketball?
We pivoted actually to a cat. So our pressure is fairly heavy. We have a very active CEO. He was the founder of the business, Kim Fonet, and he is extremely hands-on. We had a company-wide summit in Copenhagen about 2 weeks ago now, and Kim is extremely keen for us to be exploiting AI across the business. So we've taken a very structured approach to finding use cases. We just last year reorganized into a value stream based model based on our client journeys. We have 11 client journeys, and what we've been doing for our use case identification as part of our strategy is effectively sort of stack ranking which of those client journeys and value streams is gonna, we think, be able to exploit Gen AI and traditional AI the most, and then to be running some ideation sessions with each of those over time, and then start getting some development together. So we started with the top of that stack rank, which was our client service value stream and client journey, and just yesterday we were looking at some service co-pilots. We are a fairly heavy Microsoft user, so some of the stuff that Microsoft is doing in the CRM space and exploiting their partnership with OpenAI looks super interesting. You know, some of those very basic stuff like call transcription, summarization, sentiment analysis, this stuff is going to be, it's going to be brilliant for some of our service operatives. That stuff is awesome. The second one in the list, or effectively joint top, was our what we call market inspiration. So getting our traders and investors, getting some of the more interesting or relevant products. We call this TREA, timely, relevant, engaging, and actionable information. So we already have a sort of recommendation engine that we've been building on more traditional AI, but it's nowhere near as awesome as it could be. And some of the newer capabilities, especially, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a bit more, especially built on the data mesh and data platform that we've spent the last 5 years in building on top of that, and being able to use all of that sort of data at our fingertips to be able to generate some highly relevant and engaging recommendations to our traders and investors. That's effectively, again, a sort of joint top. I could go on for a long time, but those for us are the two top ones. And yes, we are feeling a lot of pressure. Sorry, I'm gonna, one more thing. The other thing which we are using and we're starting to roll out more and more is GitHub Copilot for our software developers.
Yep.
A fair few of those are finding this extremely useful. Some of them are quite sensitive. Some of them think it's going to take their job away. So some of this goes back to that culture piece of sort of how do we sell this to people? How do we roll this out, and how do we reassure people and give them the psychological safety that this is actually good for them, not bad.
100%. And yeah, lots of themes there as well. And yeah, seeing a lot of excitement, a lot of engagement with some of my development teams in terms of using ChatGPT and Copilot. And it's almost awakened a certain feeling of, oh, this is what it was like when I was pair programming for the first time. And, you know, especially when they go into a language that they haven't used before, maybe a back-end developer who's pivoting onto the front end or trying something that's scripting and they're unfamiliar with that landscape, actually learning things, learning constructs, learning principles from that interaction. So it's been very useful. We're going on our own journey around Sales Copilot, but I have noticed a lot of confusion, I think, when it tends to try and combine some of the big data sets together, and sometimes gets a bit confused around, you know, ownership of accounts and leads and things like that. So it's quite an early start, but yeah, some of that stuff will get refined over time. Any more specific kind of challenges that you think AI can address inside your organizations?
I think those are the major ones right now. I mean, I think, again, going back to that sort of client service, we ideally, ideally people don't need to phone us up at all. So one of the real challenges we didn't quite get to yesterday, but I think we're going to find super interesting, is starting to do thematic analysis of why people have picked up the phone to us.
Yeah.
What do we need to push down the stack? This is so hard at the moment, especially from phone calls. Right now, today, we ask our client service agents to do a very brief summary or classification of what the phone call was about, and get it in. Instead of that, the ideal here is no, don't do that. Let the LLM know how we would like to classify. There's some great stuff about how getting LLMs to generate JSON. And it used to be quite hard, and now it seems to be working quite well. So just being able to do that and say, great, please generate a classification in these 4 categories of what was that phone call about. Then start to use that in bulk, start to do analytics on, well, where are we seeing problems? Where do we need to fix the user experience in our trading platform? Or where do we need to do some better automation or fix bottlenecks in an operational process? And, not just help the client service agents make better calls, but stop the calls being made in the first place. So that, I think, is going to be a real sweet spot for some of the stuff that we can do there.
Very interesting. Any build on that, Daniel?
No, I mean, I guess just from an asset management perspective, I think one of the key things is really around portfolio manager productivity, right? The ability for the AI to generate instead of having to read like a 150-page kind of earnings report or something, generate a summary of it. All of those kind of things. It's really about improving portfolio manager productivity. I would say is kind of one of the areas I think is going to be most beneficial.
Okay, and staying with you, Daniel, for a second, then how do you ensure your house is in order? So what kind of fundamentals do we put in place? And I know we've had loads of conversations about data quality, structuring data, right-sizing architecture for the context we find ourselves in. So how do we prepare best for whatever's going to come next?
Yeah. So from the lab's perspective, so I guess we've been doing what we've been doing for. So when I say I haven't been at labs for the whole duration, but probably about 20 years we've been looking at this kind of behavioral finance kind of thing, and obviously the way we've been doing it has evolved over the years, but that's kind of obvious. Data is so important, right? Data is just absolutely critical. Having a well-defined logical data model, it's kind of super important. Having data quality checks, there's a whole lot of kind of really quite basic stuff that because we have a history of doing this kind of thing, sitting the AI and machine learning on top of it actually didn't have too many challenges, because whether you're preparing the data for kind of to go back far enough, kind of traditional P&L reports, all those kind of things, that's good quality, and we've just been able to build on top of that. So I mean, I think we've been quite lucky in that we have that kind of legacy. But I'd say obviously anyone coming into this fresh, it's some of these data challenges are kind of easy to kick down the road because they haven't necessarily caused operational problems, or they're things that people just know about. It's like, when this corporate action happens, the P&L is out, but fine. You'll kind of really to get the most benefit out of this, you're going to have to kind of tackle some of these probably long running challenges, I would say. I think there's a few other things that we've been thinking about. One of them is kind of a little bit kind of mundane, I guess, but is if you're using AI as part of your investment process, you've really got to keep records about what the prompts are and what the responses are, right? Because obviously, there's a lot of effort historically gone into being able to explain why a portfolio manager made an investment decision, right? So to have the AI in there, you really need to be kind of knowing what the prompts were, what the responses were, to be able to, if ever there's any kind of investigation or anything like that, to be able to say, well, this is what I asked, this is what the AI said, that was what fed into the investment decision. So I think that's important. Some other things we've had to think about is transparency to our investors as well, in terms of communications and so on. Obviously we have it has been part of kind of the way we've done things for a while, but just always thinking about if we introduce AI into other parts of the asset management business, do we need to tell investors about this? So kind of really thinking about that kind of outward communication as well. And I'll also say, kind of, we talk about starting to implement Gen AI. I mean, I probably suspect that every organization, the folk on the ground have already started implementing for us, right? So there is like a bit of a catch-up process there, I would say, in terms of just doing an inventory, understanding what's in use, what's out there, to begin with. If people aren't even at that stage, that's kind of an important place to start, I would say.
Very interesting. Any feedback on that, Simon?
I think I'd just reiterate what both Daniel said and what I said earlier, which is data. Data is just the most crucial thing here. Again, we've spent 5 years building a Kafka-based data platform that's for both operational and analytical use, that in turn syncs into Azure Data Lake, is used as a basis for both populating and querying from Databricks. And for our finance, Mark moved to Snowflake. So, we've had a whole bunch of investments in that from a number of angles, and that's really set us up for success with having that at least data population. Of course, there are data quality issues, like Daniel said, that some of them just get kicked down the curb until they become an issue. But in terms of actually having the data accessible, we've done so much about that, and it's set us really up for success in that space.
Okay, well, I think that allows us to segue into a topic I know we're both quite passionate about as well. So, focusing on data quality then, and this is financial services tech leaders. We are providing data we are regulated entities. We are providing data to regulators. There is so much governance here. So how do you protect your data? How do you ensure quality? Maybe start with you first, Daniel.
Sure. So starting with the protection side of it. So I guess Labs has always supported multi-fund, multi-portfolio manager businesses right from day one. So concepts around who could see what data with kind of timeliness constraints, all of those kind of things. This has been baked into our platform right from the start, and that's there for regulatory reasons, commercial reasons, client protection reasons. It's been a fundamental part of the way our systems have been built. So in some ways, the analytics and so on that we're doing that sit on top of this just kind of naturally follow the source data. So interestingly, we haven't, from at least within, in terms of what we've built within Labs, we've not really had to do anything new in terms of those analytics. In terms of our approach on to data quality, so kind of the key input into our all of our analytics is P&L, right? It's performance information, traders, profit on trades. Just sounds simple enough, but what we try and do is and this was probably quite revolutionary maybe 10 years ago, but it's now becoming more the norm, is that and we have one system that looks after our T0 and our historical P&L. So we have traders looking at the P&L all day, and if something is wrong, you find out about it fairly quickly, right? So you kind of got this constant kind of validation process going on over the course of the day. That at the end of the day, that data then becomes tomorrow, new day. So we go into kind of the next day with data in pretty good shape. People might throw things at me if they possibly could, but I actually think in financial services, and particularly in asset management, if you think about really a key function of the whole post-trade infrastructure is really around data verification, right? So you match with your executing broker, you then have reconciliations with your, so it's almost like we have got this entire infrastructure that is there verifying the data for us, right? And I've worked in financial services basically my entire career. but I imagine in other industries that's not the case. You know, you probably do have yeah, probably more data quality issues, and probably anyone who works in asset management will groan. But I think sometimes we do take that for granted. So by the time we're kind of on T+1, T+2, our data is looking pretty good, right? It's been verified, it's been matched. You know, the pricing data we get through the standard providers is pretty good. We have outlier checks and so on, but you know, by the time we get through this whole process, the P&L, which is our input data, is in pretty good shape. The problem we have with the data, though, is it represents the real world maybe just a little bit too much. So you get these kind of these anomalies, so things like listing changes on stocks, things like option expiries, things like corporate action and so on. So the data is correct from a street-facing view. So it's like, this is the way that our custodians see it, and that's all fine. But we need to then kind of put another layer on top of it, which then kind of almost removes the real world noise out of it, because we don't want to know that, okay, this trade was done because we had an inflow. We kind of want it taken out. So we've got a nice clean P&L series. So we kind of have something that sits on top of that. And then we do verification on that to make sure that makes sense. It's like, as much as we would love if our portfolio managers had made 200% in a day, they probably didn't, and it's probably a corporate action that's gone wrong. So we deal with that. And one of the challenges that we have in labs is we don't have a particularly large data set. So if you think that kind of the input data into all our processes is historic trades that a portfolio manager's put on, portfolio manager might only make 2 or 3 trades a day, right? So we're dealing with quite a small data set. So we don't have the luxury of kind of just dropping the outliers, right? So, you know, we have to fix everything, and that's basically our approach. And again, with a smaller data set, that's possible, but a lot of kind of anomaly detection, looking into it, working out, okay, you know, slight booking problem in ops, we haven't linked the 2 legs together. So there's a kind of constant process, but basically it's kind of like every data point is, you know, is important to us. So a lot of work goes into actually fixing the underlying data, which we're able to do. But yeah, we can't just chop off the outliers. So it's really like this whole pipeline that kind of at each point we've got checks along the way. So nothing particularly complicated going on, but it's about having the discipline to basically, you know, to convince people, yeah, we need to look into this. We need to understand why it is. We need to fix this, and kind of just, you know, making sure that the people understand the importance of the quality of the data. It's kind of super important.
What I'm hearing you say, it's a first-class citizen. It's baked in from the get-go, and you know, it's just a fundamental part of everything you do, right?
Yeah. Sorry, just come back to my point. Like, I feel like in other industries, you just don't have the luxury of kind of, if you're getting data from, I don't know, point of sale systems or whatever, you can't kind of go back and ask somebody to kind of rebook a purchase or something. Yeah, so we are in this kind of slightly luxurious position, I think, in terms of being able to go back, fix the data. And I think sometimes we kind of take that for granted in asset management.
Certainly a lot of effort goes into that.
Yep.
Simon, I know technical excellence is very close to your heart. I think having contributed a chapter in Sown Safer Happier on that very subject. So yeah, data quality and security from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, data quality, hearing a lot of things that chime well from Daniel. Of course, we have the same thing. Our post-trade process is all about making sure that the data quality of the trades is there, pricing exactly the same. Because we are, I guess, a more sort of direct to client business, then we got a bunch of client data, and there are the traditional data quality issues with onboarding, making sure onboarding forms capture everything that everybody wants downstream, and what everybody wants downstream, from sort of tax reporting, client reporting, and now sort of machine learning around the data. That's really that sort of interesting upstream to downstream challenge for us. In the trading subdomain, in the pricing subdomain, all the data quality is awesome. It's much more in the sort of client data where things get a fair bit more interesting, and we are just working on sort of operationalizing feedback loops from data consumers back upstream to data producers. So that's interesting from a security perspective, again, because we've got a lot of client data in place, because we operate in a lot of jurisdictions. We're not just in Denmark, we're not just European, we operate almost globally. We're not in the US, but we are in many continents. We have a lot of data protection regulations, especially, like I say, around that client data. So that all has to be baked into every single piece of our infrastructure. A lot of encryption. We implement a fair bit of in-place encryption, and so any of the machine learning and AI we're doing has to participate effectively in that security infrastructure.
Very, very interesting. And I'm gonna hand over to Daniel for a little bit. This is the Daniel section for a little while, but just digging on your point, Simon, about machine learning. Daniel, you've been at Labs, you've been focusing machine learning for a while. I wonder if you can talk to us a little bit about where you're using it and the ways you've found to avoid risks, especially when you're dealing with a user base. And you mentioned already that you're providing now signals to people, so there is a tangible impact here to people's psyches. So you know, what uses have you found for machine learning, and how do you mitigate any risks you have when dealing with people?
Yeah, good question. So basically, what we're kind of part of the core work we do at Labs is producing analytics on portfolio managers' kind of strengths and weaknesses, and that allows us to do really two things. And one I kind of touched on earlier, which is, you know, helping, you know, Labs doesn't in any way make the investment decision or participate in the investment decision. But once it's made, when a portfolio manager is putting on a trade, we'll try and we always talk about we're just trying to make the portfolio manager aware of things. We're not kind of suggesting, we're just saying, you know, oh, hey, you know, you're putting on a trade, this is in your sweet spot, here's a plot, here's where your trade sits, you know, based on your previous like hit and slug ratios, that you will probably do well on this. You might want to think about upsizing, kind of thing. So there's that piece to it. And then then once the trade is on, there is the, we call nudges, and that's around kind of, again, an awareness. It's basically making sure PMs are aware that, okay, you traded into this before, you know, immediately before earnings. If you're going to be profitable on this trade, it would normally have happened by 5 days. You're now 10 days in. And again, a plot of, you know, here's where you make money. You're now over here. And then do you want to think about kind of cutting the trade or something like that? So it's really about helping the portfolio managers kind of understand what they're good at, what they're not. And like I mentioned, like anyone who's as old as me would remember like Office with the clippy thing that would pop up and kind of go, you know, hey, I've noticed you're about to write a letter here. So we don't want to be clippy. And the way we deal with I guess the psychological impact is, and this is possibly going to be a slightly disappointing answer for people, but we have a team of people who look at the results of what the analytics are saying, and it's for two reasons. One is kind of, okay, thank you AI. This trader might be great at trading stocks that start with L, but we're gonna, you know, that might just possibly experience. We don't think there's anything in that. So we always we still want a human filter on this to kind of to really make sure that what goes to the PMs is credible, right? So we need somebody doing a reasonability check on it. The second part is what we don't want to have happen is when somebody's putting on a trade, that to be the point that we introduce some new information to them, right? So we don't want them to go, oh, I haven't seen this before. I need to spend some time trying to think about it. So whenever we're about to kind of adjust the model for a portfolio manager, our team will sit down and basically say, look, here are our findings. We're going to adjust your kind of rules. Let's talk through this so that when you do see it, it's not, you're not in the middle of something. It's like, well, Clippy's popped up and it's kind of bugging me. It's kind of like almost reminding people of the kind of the previous conversation they've had before, and also just that interaction as part of, you know, helping the portfolio manager develop as well. So this kind of conversation with them around, look, you know, you might not know this, but basically, you know, if you're going to make money on a trade of this nature, you will get it right within the first 30 days. If you've gotten further out beyond that, just have a think about what's your conviction in your thesis. Do you still really believe that this is going to make money? So it's kind of it's really trying to get this fusion of kind of the power of human decision making, but with kind of trying to help the portfolio managers be aware of their strengths and their weaknesses, right? And it works in both ways. If they're good at something, we maybe want to encourage them to think about sizing the trade up. If it's not so good, it's kind of like, you need to be aware, how strong is your conviction? If you really think this is a good trade, great. But again, we're never making the investment decision. It's always just about awareness. And we feel like having that human circuit breaker in there in the middle kind of means that nonsense doesn't get through from the model, and there are no surprises while people are trading. So it just kind of makes it a bit more of a gentler process than having Clippy kind of pop up from time to time.
Very interesting. And as I'm listening to you, what really comes through is it's quite conversational. It's a very humanistic way of dealing with it. It's not quite, giving people fitness trackers in billions and monitoring their heart rate. And so we haven't quite got that far yet. It sounds quite consultative, quite coaching, quite advisory, very co-pilot rather than pilot.
Yeah, and it is that, I think Simon mentioned, it's kind of like the psychological safety kind of aspect, right? It's kind of, you're asking portfolio managers to, often potentially hundreds of millions of dollars they're putting out there. You don't want something kind of chirping in their ear, eating away at their confidence, right? You don't want that. It's got to be done with kind of in a subtle, helpful way, rather than kind of something that squawks at people. Because worst case scenario is you cause the portfolio manager to lose confidence in themselves, and that becomes a disaster, because ultimately they're risk takers. They need to have confidence in what they're doing. If you kind of in their face all the time, they lose that confidence, and that's not an outcome that anyone wants.
I don't feel like we talk about this enough, to be honest. I've not heard a lot about this in terms of all the AI impacts. It's always about use cases, it's all about governance. We don't really hear about the negative impacts. There are a few case studies about machine learning and 70% impact on psyches and things like that, but I'd love to hear more about this. Simon, I know you're quite keen on talking about smart people with robot friends, right? So, and what is that humanistic element as well? So anything you can build on Daniel's point?
As you mentioned before we started recording, Raj, this was one of the themes of my chapter in the book Sooner, Safer, Happier. And I think it's an ongoing theme that a certain type of senior manager sees any kind of automation, whether it is anything from sort of CI/CD, pipeline automation, all the way up to LLM and Gen AI, as something that can replace human beings in quite what are ultimately fairly creative and humanistic tasks. And I think for me, the fact that Microsoft are promoting most of what they're selling in the Gen AI space with a clear branding of Copilot, I find really heartening. It is saying, like you said earlier, it's pairing with people, it's helping them. It's just branding this entire space as something that is not there to replace humans, but is there just to give you support, to give you decision support, and to be there to help you out. And as Daniel said, a lot of this is in how this is designed. It's how the UI is designed, how the user experience is designed, of how these can help you, that they're not sort of blaring, squawking, that they're there as a gentle, high quality support system in the task that you're doing, and to help you do it in an even more awesome way.
Very good, very interesting. One of the questions that's come through, what would you say in your experience is the big mistake that people make when implementing either machine learning or large language model projects? And what do you think, and what are the things that you're seeing that are consistently present when attempting working with machine learning or generative AI?
Big mistakes. Hopefully we in Saxo don't make big mistakes. What I would say is, as with, and because I'm a happy agilist, as with any of these things, test and learn, do things small and increment. So big mistakes that I think we are managing to avoid are trying to do anything huge, trying to pivot our, entire an entire feature over to being entirely run by an LLM. No. Even in our chatbot, we are extremely careful. We are getting the AI to select existing articles from our help system rather than hallucinating. Reminds me of a great mistake made by, I think it was Air Canada's chatbot, which they did pivot over to entire Gen AI, and it hallucinated a policy. Somebody followed that hallucinated policy. Air Canada then tried to claim to a court that they shouldn't have had to offer the refund to the person, and the court said no. This is just part of your website, and that policy that it hallucinated, you've got to stand up to it. So I think that sort of mistake is of going all in when you haven't solved the hallucination problem. I think for me, when it comes to LLM projects, is the big one. And like I said, for us, we are taking baby steps. We're using LLM subtly and being very conscious of hallucination risk.
Very interesting. Daniel, any build on that?
No, I mean, I'd say, like, obviously we touched on the data thing. I'm sure there are projects out there where they haven't got the data in shape before they tried to implement. I completely agree on the hallucination. It's like you've got to go into the Gen AI space. This is probabilistic, right? It is, and trying to use it in scenarios where you need something that has to be deterministic. Obviously, if you're not thinking about it in the right way, that will be a problem. And then I guess also, one of my first points around giving. So I can't remember what the product I was using a couple of weeks ago, but it had like an AI feature on that. I'm just like, why is this even here? I tried to use it, went away, thought about stuff for 2 minutes, and came back with something completely useless. So that's probably a firm that has spent probably not an insignificant amount of money developing something because they felt like they need to, right? So I think that's probably like another kind of fatal mistake that companies will likely make.
Very good. And we're kind of coming to the dying embers of our conversation right now. I think the final few questions then. Are you seeing any particular AI trends in the financial services industry? And how do you stay informed? I think from a personal point of view, I'm quite interested in how you separate signal from noise here and what you found to be successful. Maybe start off with you, Daniel.
So, I mean, look, I think it's probably a full-time job for somebody to kind of stay on top of what's going on, right? It's like, there is so much momentum with all of this stuff. I try and I've got a few newsletters I follow, but Simon had a good term for this. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but it's basically like, it's almost like the users are almost coming to us as kind of they've been approached by vendors and so on. So it's probably a slightly unsatisfactory answer, but to some degree it is just kind of dealing with this on a case by case basis as things come up. And again, I guess it's because we don't have like very specific problems we're trying to solve. It's kind of trying to cast the net quite wide, see what comes in. Obviously, sales folk from the vendors are not shy about approaching on LinkedIn and so on. So there's a constant flow of things there. And in terms of filtering it, I think it's about probably again a bit of a dull answer, but I think it's just kind of really being sensible, just really trying to understand kind of, okay, the claims you're making, I've had claims that kind of AI will come in and it'll do all this process mining, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, possibly. Maybe I'm kind of again showing a lack of imagination, but it's just really obviously listening to what people have got to say, but also just being having a healthy skepticism, I think, around kind of the claims that are being made.
Yeah, it's like the last 20 years of software engineering, right, and everything else that's come along.
Exactly.
And Simon, any trends that you're seeing in the sector?
Honestly, we're at that stage of the hype cycle where there is a fire hose of trends. And I think I will just echo again, maintain that healthy skepticism. The relatively low-hanging fruit are in, I think, the client service area, and just keep an eye on what's happening elsewhere. And my boss, Matthias, has been leading on our AI strategy. He's reached out to a number of consultancies, looked at the sort of spaces in financial services where there are suggestions of use of AI, and it's pretty much everywhere. It's like looking at a functional model of financial services. People are trying things because we are at that stage of the hype cycle in almost all spaces. Are they having success? Wait and see.
That's very interesting. And before we started filming this, behind the scenes, one of the things we were talking about was an interesting stat from Gartner that I come across yesterday, where it looked like 30% of Gen AI POCs will be cancelled or be abandoned throughout 2025. And they pinpointed these 4 reasons, and one of them was data quality, just not having good quality data, not having the risk controls in it, having escalating costs and unclear business value. So you can see the fact that we're probably going from the peak and probably maybe kind of reaching, I don't know if we're reaching that trough of disillusionment is one of the things I'm feeling right now. And as we bring the conversation to a close, any closing thoughts, any for our audience? Simon.
I think, again, be conscious of where we are in the hype cycle. There is a lot of extremely helpful tools out there, but they are tools. Our COO, Søren Kuhl at Saxo, is extremely pragmatic and very sort of hype phobic. And he basically says exactly this. See this as another tool in the toolbox. We have plenty of strong technical tools that can help us serve our clients and reduce cost and complexity in doing so. There will be plenty of opportunities for AI to do that, but ultimately it is another tool in the toolbox.
Gotcha. Any final thoughts from you, Daniel?
So I was trying to think. So the last time I think there was as much hype around something, kind of in asset management at least, would probably be blockchain, probably about 10 years ago, right? And I remember sitting in a meeting with a partner from one of the big 4 consultancies and basically saying to us, if you're not doing everything on blockchain post-trade within 2 years, your company's over. You're done. And in a room of practitioners, everyone's going, and I feel like this is just fundamentally different this time around, right? This is actually, it's almost like the flow is going the other way, right? It's the practitioners finding uses for this technology, and kind of it's filtering, it's filtering out. It feels fundamentally different, and I think, obviously blockchain, there have been some kind of niche use cases, maybe that will kind of revolutionize things, but 10 years in, I still remain a bit skeptical. This feels fundamentally different, right? And when we're talking about, well, really, how do we get this thing under control? That to me says, there's a huge, this will be transformational. As Simon says, obviously quite a bit of hype around it and so on, but it's not clear exactly how this is going to play out. But I really do feel that this is, there's a lot here, and this will, this is going to yield huge benefits.
I think that's a good place to leave it then. Be sensible, understand good computer science principles, and I think we need more than a point of view, I think is what we're saying, right? And this is going to be truly transformational. All that remains for me to say thank you to our panelists, Simon and Daniel. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to everybody that joined us, and feel free to connect on LinkedIn and our website to carry on the conversation. Cheers all.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.